In this week's video, we learn a bit more about the Shufat refugee camp. We speak to Unison about them joining the Vigil, and the amazing Emma tells us about her support for a ceasefire around the world. But first, let's hear from a few of the people that were there.
Yeah, we've just been to a talk with Orkney politician Alistair Carmichael, and it's frustrating with the politics, how slow the kind of progress is, but just know at least that we're all thinking and we all know the urgency, and we all really care. Yeah.
Basically agree with what Pip has just said. We've just been to the talk by Alistair Carmichael, a question and answer session, and it was interesting to hear the different views, but I completely reiterate what you've just said. It's just frustrating that it takes so long and there doesn't seem to be the political will to actually put the pressure from the UK government to actually change things. But also a point that he did make as well is the fact that the media, sort of the press, the larger press, just doesn't seem to keep this up there as an agenda. Especially noticed it during Christmas. It seemed to drop off out of the press completely, and it needs that constant pressure and will to change things.
For the first time, we noticed a couple of people holding posters with the Unison trade union label. So I asked Danny to tell us what's behind this.
Firstly, I should say that Unison branch committee members and members have been here, I think, every week since the start, and our Unison branch, which is Unison Orkney Local Services branch, has been publicising the vigils and supporting them. But there was an opportunity for us to support it more specifically as a branch, because this weekend we were having an event bringing together people from the branch, so we had planned to all come down en masse, but unfortunately because of issues with travel we've not been able to do that, because the event had to be moved online, and we didn't have the numbers that were coming to Orkney and coming to Kirkwall. But certainly Unison has publicly called for a ceasefire from late October, and as a position that we want to see an end to the bombing. Also called for the release of all hostages, but for an end to the bombing and for humanitarian aid to be allowed in. And the situation has just become more and more concerning. The death toll now reaching, I think, around about 24,000, and a significant number of that being children. And although the Israeli government and army has said that there are no innocents in Gaza, we would certainly take the position that children are always innocent and should never be targeted in any conflict. So Unison will continue to be supporting these demonstrations and continue to be attending and continuing to be calling for a ceasefire and for humanitarian aid to be allowed into Gaza.
Well, I suppose it's really down to Danny Oliver. We had a training session this morning, so we've adjourned that until 3 o'clock so that we can come here to support. And really, we should have been here earlier, we're aware of that. But anyway, we're here now and say we absolutely support you guys and what you've been doing so far. And we're sorry we're late to the party, as it were.
If you've seen the video from last week, you will have seen Dr. Salim from the Shufat refugee camp, along with some pictures of the camp. I was confused that the camp looked more like a high-rise building site, so I asked Gaynor if she could explain.
Yeah, so I've been asked about Shufat refugee camp, and we refer to all of these refugee camps in the West Bank and across Palestine as refugee camps, and that often conjures up this idea of tented communities. But these are camps that were established, back after 1948, and they started off as tented communities and in Shufat's case it was a camp of tents for 5,000 people on a 1 kilometre square mile, and over the years, there's now 4 generations living in that space, so the tents are gone and they've built properties on that space, and the buildings have been put up, and then buildings have been put on top of the buildings and on top of the buildings. So you've kind of got this very ramshackle, high-rise refugee camp now, as it is today, based on how it was when it was first established. So going from 5,000 people, it's now got probably around 60,000 plus, with very limited resources and in very unsafe housing, with a very unsafe infrastructure. That, given what's happening in Gaza, there's still repercussions on a daily basis in the camp in terms of bulldozers going in, pulling down some of those buildings, an extra military might to arrest people, there's more shooting, there's more tear gas, there's more skunk water being used on a daily basis. So all of this is just part and parcel of the occupation, which has kind of been completely ramped up since what's been happening in Gaza, and this is happening right across the West Bank.
Finally, Nadia introduced me to Emma, who had an amazing story to tell of campaigning for a ceasefire.
For a free Palestine for over 21 years. I started campaigning when I became friends with a man from Gaza in China over 21 years ago, so we were both living in China. I have been a campaigner now recently, and I'm really because one of my close friends and ex-colleagues is from Gaza, so we work together running refugee projects in Edinburgh, supporting Syrian, Afghan families that have come under the United Nations Vulnerable Person Relocation Scheme. So my friend in Gaza, sadly, her sister, her nieces and nephews were killed because of Israeli bombardment in Gaza. So myself and my friend Aline have been out in Edinburgh on the marches, running art spaces to hold space for people impacted, and to put pressure on the government to call for a ceasefire and to recognise Palestine as a free state. And I'm up in Orkney now, so I love to attend these vigils when I'm here. So I got back from Egypt last Sunday, and I met my friend's best friend who was training in medicine in Cairo. So he's a GP in Cairo. He's training to be a surgeon, and he wants to go back to the West Bank to practice, but obviously he can't go back at the moment. And I also met the head of the Free Palestine campaign from Copenhagen in Denmark, who is Palestinian and is part of the diaspora there. And again, he was taking a break in Egypt because he's just been so overwhelmed. All of his family are out in Gaza, and none of them can escape. A lot of the time the phone lines are cut, so he cannot communicate with them. So I think it's important to show solidarity. My two children are dual heritage Moroccan, Irish, so we're all very connected to this world, actually, and it's very distressing to see so much racism and Islamophobia around at the moment, which is really dehumanizing the Palestinians. So we keep going, Ireland and Palestine hand in hand.